Thunder held its breath, then the gun spoke. Marble rang like a bell, and the world tilted. The mansion lights hummed low, and shadows crawled over gilt frames. Michael Stone steadied his hands. He feared the echo in his chest more than the pistol's bark. Vittorio Moretti lay still, power leaking across white stone like ink. Michael said, this was never the plan. His goal was simple now: survive the night and learn who pulled the strings. A phone buzzed near the fallen king. The screen glowed like a lighthouse, cold and small. Michael said, don't touch it, not yet. Footsteps whispered beyond the corridor, a pace too calm for panic. The screen lit again with a draft. He reached, torn by duty and dread. The message formed itself like fate. It's done. The king is dead. But whose thumb sent it? The storm settled into a low growl, like the house itself was thinking. Michael traced the floor with careful steps, counting cameras and exits. He wanted answers more than safety, yet safety kept him breathing. Raphael said, we don't own this moment. Michael said, we own what we do next. Their fear was simple. Whoever fired first was not finished. The lights buzzed, thin as a warning. Elena watched from the stairs, still as glass. Michael felt the old wound open. That loyalty cut that never healed. He needed the phone. He needed the logs. He needed time the night would not give. Sergei moved, slow, a tide with boots. A breeze slid over marble and carried a scent of cordite and sea salt. Michael said, secure the wing. The hallway replied with silence, the kind that makes a promise. What promise was it making? The phone lay between guilt and need. Michael crouched and felt heat where fear should be. He said, if this message sent, the city already shifted. Raphael said, then don't let it breathe. Michael opened the thread. Numbers masked. Words cut short. He chased patterns, not hope. The screen threw cold light on his face, and memory climbed in. Oaths whispered under chandeliers, debts sealed with wine and knives. He searched call logs, saw a private relay bounce across oceans. Someone planned this with care. Elena said, walk away. Michael heard warning and history in equal parts. The wind pressed the windows like a hand on glass. He copied a string of keys and locked the phone. He said, this is a door we can't unopen. A floorboard sighed behind him, who stood there listening. They reached the study, a room of maps and money. The fireplace held ashes that looked arranged, not spent. Michael said, he staged his last hours like a meeting. Sergei said, kings plan their endings. The desk reeked of ink and metal. Ledgers lay open to blank pages, a trick that hides more than it shows. Michael opened a drawer and found a black card with no name. He felt a tremor pass his ribs. Raphael said, burn or follow. Michael said, follow, and pray it burns clean. The rain softened to a steady tap like a code. He scanned the ceiling for vents, caught a red lead that blinked out of rhythm. A camera watched and then pretended not to. He killed it with a sleeve and a twist. The chimney carried a draft that smelled of sea. What in this room was meant to survive? Sirens hinted on the horizon, but did not near. The estate held the city at arm's length. Michael stood by the window and watched the sea pulse black. He said, we have minutes, not mercy. Elena drifted beside him, a shape carved from smoke. She said, you never learned to leave. The wound flared again. He remembered the first oath and the last lie. Raphael tucked the phone into a Faraday pouch and nodded once. Sergei checked his watch like a judge. Michael's goal sharpened. Trace the relay, find the hand, cut the route. The chandelier whispered with tiny clicks as the storm eased. The house had heard worse, yet this silence felt new. Michael said, we split, we circle, we meet at the boats. The sea answered with one hard wave. Who would reach the water, and who would stay behind? Rain hit like nails as the pier alarms woke the dark. Michael ran, breath cutting the cold, boots loud on wet planks. He saw wake lights tilt and vanish behind fog. Raphael said, "We're burned," Michael said. "Then we run smarter." Sirens stitched the harbor with thin blue lines. The wind shoved diesel smoke across the slips and stung his eyes. He wanted control, but fear moved first and faster. Elena kept pace, face set, coat whipping like a flag that refused to fall. She said, "You doubt me again." He heard more than words. He heard a ledger of old wounds. Sergei flanked left, silent, scanning cranes. The dock crew stared, then looked away, then stared again. Michael felt the night choose sides. A forklift engine coughed and died. Raphael pointed to a container with a fresh seal. Michael said, "New route, new rules." The seal code matched the phone keys. They ducked into a maintenance tunnel where the storm became a hush. Pipes ticked like cooling nerves. Michael leaned on a rusted rail and let the ache speak. He said, "I should have seen this coming." Elena wiped rain from her lashes and said, "You see ghosts, not signs." Raphael cracked a glow stick. The light bled green on their faces. Trust weighed more than air. Sergei set down a dry pack and passed gauze, practical as stone. Michael wanted to believe the room was safe, but safety in their world was a rumor. He knew his fear could steer him wrong, yet he also knew it kept him alive. On the wall, a stencil of a black crown sat over a date. Raphael said, "He was here." Michael touched the paint and felt grit. He said, "The crown travels." The crown meant one name, a name the docks feared to speak. Power showed its teeth on a yacht beyond the breakwater. Not the dead king's, another. Michael watched through rain and saw men move like choreography. A drone rose, blinked once, and vanished into cloud. Raphael said, "Voss?" The name dimmed the tunnel like a switch. Adrian Voss did not shout. He arranged. Elena said, "He buys storms and sells calm." Sergei's jaw set like iron plate. Michael measured the distance between their courage and that hull. He said, "He turned our house into a stage." On the phone logs, the relay had landed on a Voss shell. It fit too well. The yacht's deck lights warmed, then cooled, as if the boat was thinking. A launch peeled off toward the city with quiet confidence. Michael said, "He knows we're watching." A single flare popped and fell dark. What message sits inside that silence? They sought a voice that never lied to them, only hurt. In a chapel by the fish market, candles clicked in drafts and told old stories. Father Gabriel waited in a pew like a verdict that forgave nothing. Michael said, "We need truth, not comfort." The priest said, "Truth is comfort when you stop resisting it." Elena looked at the floor and did not blink. Raphael paced, counting steps that led nowhere. The priest named debts that still breathed and sins that wore new suits. He spoke of the crown mark, of a pact born after a winter war. Michael heard his past set to bells and salt. He wanted to be clean and knew he was not. Father Gabriel said, "You chase wolves and ignore the shepherd." The words cut slow. He pointed to a ledger, thin and old. Sergei read the last entry and went still. Which name should not be here? The ledger named shell accounts that echoed the phone keys. It also named a signatory Michael knew too well. He closed his eyes and saw the mansion floor again. He said, "We stop chasing waves. We go for the tide," Raphael said. "Then we hit Voss's relay farm." Elena said, "You mean his embassy?" Sergei checked a map and drew a line through alleys and roofs. Michael felt fear argue with resolve and lose by an inch. He said, "We move now before dawn makes us slow." The chapel bell rolled once, like a warning becoming a plan. Father Gabriel said, "Mercy is not the same as delay." Michael nodded, then turned. He carried guilt like a blade and hope like a bruise. The door opened to wet stone and a city that never sleeps, only blinks, he said. No more shadows. A phone vibrated in his pocket with a hidden caller. Calm wore a cheap mask at a riverside safe flat. The kettle clicked and rain softened to a patient drip. Michael stood by the window and let the city slow his pulse. A courier named Mara arrived with a smile that looked practiced. She said, "You needed clean channels." Raphael eyed her case like it might bite. Elena set 2 cups and did not drink. The room felt almost human, like rules applied here. Michael said, "We route through your mesh and vanish." Mara said, "You root, you appear where you choose." It sounded like help and tasted like risk. Sergei checked exits with the same quiet ritual. The kettle hissed again, long and thin. Michael wanted to trust the pause, but pauses hide teeth. A drone hum passed outside and faded. He said, "We send one test." Mara's fingers paused on the keyboard. Why did that pause feel like a tell? The test packet moved, slow and clean, and returned like a boomerang with a map of Voss shells. Michael felt a thread of hope pull tight. He said, "This can work," Mara said. "I like it when courage meets proof." Elena laughed once, small, almost kind. Raphael eased a shoulder knot and said, "First good news tonight." They circled the table and marked 3 sectors like thieves, planning a feast. Michael spoke softer, as if volume could keep luck from hearing. He said, "We cut one line and bait the other." Mara's eyes shone in the screen glow, then dimmed. She said, "You trust slow or you die fast." The room breathed as one for a beat. Outside, a barge horn groaned and dragged sound across the water. Michael touched Elena's hand, brief and warm. She did not pull away. Why did warmth feel like a debt he could not pay? They met the mirror at a warehouse office where glass waited to break. Adrian Voss appeared on a muted screen. No sound, only captions like commandments. He said, "Order favors those who write the rules," Michael said, "and who buries the bodies." Voss smiled like a man holding weather in his pocket. He offered a truce written in iron and debt. Elena watched him with an intent that cut. Raphael said, "He is buying time." Sergei said nothing. He measured the man's calm. Michael felt anger thaw, then refreeze into focus. Voss's eyes never blinked at the right moments. The captions promised a ceasefire around a charity gala. Control leaked from the screen like heat. Michael said, "He sets the table. We bring the bill." The screen dimmed to a black crown. What part of this calm is meant to fail first? The betrayal came quiet, like a door that never squeaks until tonight. Michael traced the relay to a wall jack behind the loft bookshelf. A second mesh lived there, slick and hidden. He said, "Who built this?" Mara reached for her case. Sergei blocked her with a look. Elena stepped in close and said, "Stop." Her voice held history and command. Raphael found a key fob in the vents that matched the crown stencil. Michael turned and saw Elena's eyes flick to the window, then back. He said, "Tell me it isn't you." She said nothing, and the silence spoke in knives. The drone hum grew, then settled above the roof like a waiting hawk. The lights browned, then steadied. Michael felt the floor tilt, not the world. He said, "How long?" Elena said, "Long enough." The lock on the door clicked from the outside. Silence owned the room before fear rented it. Michael tasted metal and old vows. He said, "Family first was the lie, wasn't it?" Elena's eyes were bright and tired. She said, "Family first is why this ends." Raphael swallowed rage and looked to the door. Sergei lifted the case and reset his stance. Outside, the drone drifted off like a promise withdrawn. Michael saw the larger hand moving pieces. Voss, or someone behind him. He understood he had chased a shadow to find a mirror. He said, "We cut the mesh and take the roof." Elena said, "You won't outrun the tide." The room held its breath. Michael chose motion over grief. He broke the shelf plate and tore the line free. Sparks snapped. The city blinked in reply. He said, "Act on 3." He did not count. The window latch slid, and the night reached in with cold fingers. Silence claimed the city before dawn. The river smoked under pale light, and the safe flat smelled of metal and rain. Michael stood near the broken window, watching fog erase the skyline. His pulse matched the hum of streetlights flickering below. Raphael slept in a chair, gun in hand, while Sergei packed what remained of trust into a duffel. Elena's absence sat heavy in the room, louder than any sound. Michael said softly, "She was never lost. We were." He touched the cracked phone, scrolling through ghosted messages, fragments of a life rewritten by deceit. Every timestamp whispered planning, not chance. Outside, a gull cried, the only truth still honest. He felt the world tilt toward clarity. The pieces fit too well. The call logs, the crown, the priest ledger. All roads led home. He said, "Voss didn't build this empire." His reflection answered in a whisper, "We did." The smell of old whiskey drew him into memory. The mansion's hall shimmered in his mind. Laughter, music, the clink of deals sealed in sin. Vittorio Moretti's voice echoed from the past. "Power is a circle, Michael. You only fall if you think you're outside it." He saw himself, younger, sharp suit, eyes hungry. Elena poured the wine then, not yet a ghost but already a secret. The piano played low as contracts burned in candlelight. He blinked, and the sound became rain against the roof again. Raphael said, "You okay?" Michael said, "I remember when loyalty felt clean." Sergei lit a cigarette and said, "It never was." The memory uncoiled. Vittorio signing an envelope with a crown seal, addressed to Voss. Michael exhaled. He said, "We were never at war with him." The truth hit cold. The syndicate had always been one body wearing two faces. He called Father Gabriel at the edge of sunrise. The priest answered with quiet breath. Michael said, "You knew," the priest replied. "You needed time to see it." The line crackled, like memory resisting truth. Michael's hand trembled, but his voice held. Voss wasn't the head. The priest's sigh carried weight like confession. Vittorio built two sons, one by blood, one by faith. You were both. Silence burned through static. Michael said, "Elena," the priest said. "She carried the crown so you wouldn't have to." The words scraped something raw inside him. The window light flared, turning his reflection into someone older, harder. He felt the air thin, as if knowledge consumed oxygen. Raphael stirred and looked up. Michael said, "He made me his heir and his weapon." The priest said, "You decide which survives." The call ended. Truth stayed, sharp as glass. The yacht's deck gleamed like a blade beneath noon light. Michael faced Adrian Voss across polished steel and salt air. Voss said, "You always looked for a king to kill when you were the crown all along." His calm voice carried no pride, only finality. Michael said, "You played him. You played me." Voss smiled faintly. "No, I kept the bout." Vittorio built chaos. I sold order. The sea hissed below, whispering agreement. Sergei kept guard near the bow, eyes on waves, not men. Voss leaned closer. "Good and evil are habits, Michael, not sides." The truth uncoiled. The empire wasn't destroyed, just evolving. Michael said, "You killed him to save yourself." Voss replied, "He told me to." The words hit harder than gunfire. Michael saw the reflection of the crown emblem on the rail. Was it destiny or design? The sun bled into evening, painting gold on wounds. Michael sat on the pier, coat torn, salt spray on his face. He said, "So this was the truth all along." Raphael stood behind him, silent, carrying more ghosts than answers. The Empire had not died, it had shifted hands, and he was the new ghost wearing the crown. The gulls cried like sirens of confession. Michael watched the waves erase footprints one by one. He whispered, "I wasn't meant to end it. I was meant to become it." He let the wind carry the words, hoping they would drown before reaching anyone. In that quiet, he found peace and loss woven together. The city lights began to wake, unaware of what had changed. Michael stood, calm now, clarity sharp in his eyes. He said, "If I am the last king, I'll burn the throne myself." The embassy garage held its breath, and the strip lights flickered like bad nerves. Footsteps climbed the echo until it felt like a drum. Michael counted heartbeats and doors. He said, "On my mark," Raphael whispered. "We break, we bleed, we win." Sergei tested the latch with a slow pull. The elevator chimed, soft as a threat. Air tasted of coolant and cordite. A service gate slid open a hand's width, then stopped. Michael raised 2 fingers and let them fall. They ghosted along a wall of glass that showed a server's spine lit like a cold forest. He felt fear ask for a vote and told it no. A camera blinked once and went blind. Elena's last look still lived in his chest, sharp and warm. He said, "No crowns tonight." The main door unlocked with a clean click. Beyond it, blue light rolled like tide. The collision waited 1 step away. They breached the atrium where glass met steel and night. Adrian Voss stood on a mezzanine, calm as a judge. He said, "You bring fire to stop rain," Michael said. "I bring endings." Voss smiled without heat. "Order builds roads. Your chaos only burns maps." Raphael snapped, "Your roads lead to graves." The lights pulsed, and a gate rolled across the floor like a slow blade. Guards moved with clean steps. Michael felt time cut into pieces and chose the sharpest. He drove left as Sergei surged right. Shots cracked, small and exact. Voss watched like a man reading weather. Michael said, "This is not your storm." Voss said, "It never was yours." The balcony lights stuttered. Michael hit the control and dropped a shield. Sparks fell like cold stars. He saw the path to the core and ran. The fight swallowed his name and spat out purpose. The corridor to the core narrowed until breath scraped walls. A turret woke with a dry cough. Sergei stepped into the bite and took the metal meant for Michael. He said, "Move." The word was a door and a vow. Michael dragged him behind a brace as alarms thinned into a high whine. The world slowed and softened its edges. Raphael pressed hands to the wound and said, "Stay with me." Sergei laughed once, small and proud. "I have stayed through worse," he said, and the lie was kind. Michael felt the room fall back and the man rise forward. Silence filled the gaps between beeps like snow. He said, "I owe you everything," Sergei said. "Then finish." The line hit like a bell. Michael looked toward the core and saw the cost drawn clear. He stood lighter and heavier at once. The price had been paid in a language he knew. The core chamber breathed cold and blue. Racks hummed like a choir that never prayed. Michael found Voss waiting by a glass manifold where flame gas snaked for fire suppression. Voss said, "You kill a system, another grows." Michael said, "Not this one." Their steps drew slow circles in twin reflections. Rain hammered the skylight. Sprinklers held their breath. Voss moved first, clean and trained. Michael met him with purpose, not rage. Hands struck, Bodies turned. Metal kissed bone. Voss said, "Rule or be ruled." Michael said, "Serve or be lost." He seized the lever and snapped the lock. Gas hissed, white and wide. Sprinklers burst, water met spark. Light split to silver and fire. He pinned Voss to glass with the last of his fear. The chamber roared like a birth and a funeral. He chose the lever again and pulled for good. Alarms died by inches until only rain spoke through the broken roof. The fire shrank to soft breath and went to sleep. Michael stood in the steam and let the heat leave his hands. Raphael found him and said, "He's down." "The net is ash," Michael said. "So are we a little." They walked past the racks that once held names and debts. Water ran in bright threads like new handwriting. Sergei limped in, pale but upright, and lifted 2 fingers with a quiet grin. Michael felt a door open inside his chest and not close. He said, "It's over enough." The chamber gave back a clean echo. He looked up into the rain and did not ask for mercy. He let the silence finish the thought. A single server light blinked once and went dark. He said, "Begin again." The word was small and carried far. An era ended with steam and quiet. Smoke thinned to a soft veil over the ruined relay floor, and the city exhaled. The sprinklers clicked off one by one, leaving only distant gulls and slow breathing. Michael stood still among wet cables and glass, feeling the hush land on his shoulders. He did not speak because words would bruise the quiet. Raphael rubbed his eyes and said, "We're here, somehow." Sergei leaned on a beam and let the ache settle. Dawn pressed a pale stripe through a broken skylight, gentle as a hand on a fevered brow. Michael said, "No sirens now. No chase." The calm felt earned and cruel at once. He watched water crawl toward a scorched crown mark, and new endings are never clean. He counted who was missing without moving his lips. He said, "She is gone." The word hung in the light and told the truth he had avoided. Something dear did not survive. He walked the empty pier as the tide turned, counting breaths like penance. The wind carried salt and old music from a bar that never closed. Michael said, "I left pieces of myself in every room we burned." His voice was thin, almost private. Memories rose in quick cuts. A toast under chandeliers, Elena's hand on a rail, Vittorio's ring on marble, a drone's cold hum. Raphael fell back to give him space and said nothing. Sergei kept pace without sound, a shadow with patience. Michael tried to name the shape of relief and found only guilt with softer edges. He said, "We did not fix the world. We only made it honest." A gull skimmed the water and lifted, simple and free. He saw a future that moved without him at the center. He exhaled and let the wish go. Life would continue, only it would not bow anymore. He found her where the city meets its own reflection, a riverside bench with peeling paint. Elena sat like a ghost, learning to breathe. The air slowed around them until seconds felt elastic. Michael said, "You kept me alive and set the trap." She watched the water and said, "I kept the door open when you were ready." Their words were small and careful, like hands near a flame. He saw the ledger in her eyes and the cost in her shoulders. Time loosened and stretched, then held still. He said, "I wanted a clean story." She said, "Clean stories wash out the truth." The river tapped the stones like steady applause. He let the anger go and kept the lesson. Forgiveness came with no music, only quiet breath. He said, "I hear you." She nodded once, and the echo in his chest softened. The chapel smelled of wax and salt again, and bells counted slow time. Father Gabriel's old recorder sat on the lectern, red light steady. His voice filled the room with a warmth that did not ask to be believed. "You looked for a crown to carry or crush," the recording said. You forgot crowns are only circles we draw. Michael stood in the aisle and felt years fold like paper. He remembered the winter oath, the summer raid, the autumn lie. The voice said, "Power without mercy is noise. Mercy without truth is sleep." Raphael closed his eyes and breathed easier. Sergei bowed his head with a respect that spoke of battlefields long past. Michael said, "I hear you, Father." The tape clicked and fell silent. He smiled without showing teeth, small and sure. A lesson landed where a wound had been. Some weight finally moved. He returned to the mansion ruins at Blue Hour, when light forgives edges. The marble was clean now, yet the room remembered. Michael set a small metal crown on the hearth and opened the flue. He said, "No more kings." Raphael stood watch in the hall. Sergei checked the windows with calm hands. Michael struck a match and fed the crown to fire until it softened and lost shape. He felt the old circle bend and break. He said, "We choose work, not thrones." The flame spoke in soft cracks and gave no blessing. He closed his eyes and listened to the quiet after heat. The city outside began to glow like a field of patient stars. He turned and faced the door, lighter by a thread. Tomorrow would not care who he used to be. He stepped out with steady breath. Something ended with grace, and something waited. Morning laid a quiet sheet over the docks, and even the gulls seemed to speak softer. The water moved in slow, glassy folds, unbothered by names or crowns. Michael rested his hands on a rail that smelled of salt and sun. He counted what was gone, then stopped counting. Raphael said, "We're still here." The words were small and perfect. Sergei nodded and let the silence do most of the work. A tugboat muttered far off, like a city waking without hurry. Michael said, "We built storms, then learned to stand in rain." The wind pushed a single scrap of paper along the boards and into the sea. He watched it sink and decided not to save it. The choice felt right and ordinary. He looked at the horizon and did not ask for a sign. The stillness answered anyway. Was it worth it, he wondered, if peace arrives with scars? They walked the market lane where steam rose from grates and coffee lines curled. Michael moved with new weight that did not drag. He carried no bag, only clean pockets. Raphael said, "Work first." "We fix what we can," Michael said. One street at a time. He felt the city meet his steps without fear. A poster with the crown emblem peeled from a wall and fluttered into a drain. Sergei laughed once and let it go. The rhythm was simple now. Walk, listen, choose. Michael pushed a door open for an old man and did not rush inside. He said, "Thank you to no one and to everything." The air tasted like rain and bread. He thought of the hearth and the soft metal. He thought of Elena by the river and her quiet nod. The lane curved ahead like a kind question. He followed, lighter than the day before. At the chapel, a small envelope waited with his name in a careful hand. Inside lay a key and a note from Father Gabriel. The voice arrived in memory, not tape. "You want justice to end pain," it said. "Justice only ends hiding." Michael stood under the patient light and let the words take root. He pictured Vittorio's ring on marble and how it meant weight, not wisdom. He pictured Elena's steady gaze when truth hurt more than lies. Raphael said, "What is it?" Michael said. "A door, maybe the right one." The note ended with a line that felt like a hand on his back. "Walk without crowns, and you will not bow." He folded the paper and did not feel smaller. He felt placed. The theme of his life turned and faced him, simple at last. He bowed his head and said, "I hear you." The echo was kind. Afternoon spread across the harbor like a calm answer. Workers shouted names and jokes, and none were code. A bar owner hosed the sidewalk, and the water ran clear. Michael watched a crew fix a rail they had cracked in the night, and the sound of the drill felt like a promise kept. Sergei bought tea and said, "To ordinary days." Raphael raised a cup and said, "To honest work." Michael drank and let the heat find his chest. He thought of all the rooms where whispers once ruled and felt no need to return. He said, "Let the city breathe." The wind flipped a menu sign and left it right side up. The world did not need his permission to heal, but it took his offer. He smiled in the way only tired men smile. Change had a rhythm, and he could hear it now. Dusk returned to the pier where the story first turned. The water kept its quiet contract with the sky. Michael set the small key on the rail and did not pick it up again. He said, "No more circles." Raphael stood a step away and respected the space. Sergei faced the horizon and let the silence hold. The phone in Michael's pocket buzzed once and fell still. He did not look. He let the final breath of light pass over the deck and into night. He said, "What we keep is what we do." The tide rose and erased old scuffs on the boards. He placed his palm flat and felt the grain real and rough. Then he turned and walked, not faster, not slower. The pier waited behind him without claim. Truth must never be owned. It must be lived or it leaves.